My name is Rebecca, and it all began when I was just 7 years old, the year my parents decided to divorce. Mom and Dad, bless their hearts, came up with what they thought was the perfect solution. They agreed I'd live with each of them in turns. At the time, it seemed ideal. I'd get to spend time with both parents, and neither would feel left out. My dad, always the entrepreneur, had his own successful business. This allowed him the flexibility to take time off whenever it was his turn to have me. We'd hop in his car and hit the road, exploring nearby cities and creating memories I'll cherish forever. Those trips with Dad were magical. We'd visit museums, try local cuisines, and sometimes just drive aimlessly, singing along to the radio at the top of our lungs. It was during these moments that I felt closest to him, like we were the only two people in the world. When it was Mom's turn, life was different but equally enjoyable. She lived with my grandparents, and their house was always filled with warmth and laughter. Grandma would bake cookies, filling the air with the scent of vanilla and cinnamon, while Grandpa regaled me with stories from his youth. For a while, this back-and-forth life seemed perfect. I had the best of both worlds, excitement with Dad and comfort with Mom. But as with most things in life, change was inevitable. It happened when I was about 9. Dad called me one evening when I was at Mom's place. His voice was a mix of nervousness and excitement. "Becky," he said, using the nickname only he used for me, "I've got some news. I've met someone special, and we're getting married." My heart raced. A stepmom? I didn't know how to feel about that. Would she like me? Would Dad still want to go on our trips? When I finally met Sarah, my new stepmother, she seemed nice enough. She smiled a lot and asked me questions about school and my hobbies. For a while, things were okay. She'd join Dad and me on some of our trips, and sometimes she'd even suggest fun activities for us to do together. As I entered my early teens, I noticed a shift in Sarah's behavior. She became increasingly preoccupied with the idea of having a baby. I'd often overhear hushed conversations between her and Dad, filled with words like fertility treatments and trying again. It was clear that Sarah desperately wanted a child of her own. One summer, when I was 14, I went off to sports camp. It was a chance to escape the growing tension at home and just be a kid for a while. The day before I left, Sarah pulled me aside. "Rebecca," she said, her eyes gleaming with excitement, "I have some news. I'm pregnant." I was genuinely happy for her and Dad. Maybe this would make everything better, I thought. I headed off to camp, looking forward to 2 weeks of fun and freedom. When I returned home, tanned and full of camp stories, everything seemed normal at first. Sarah was still excited about the pregnancy, and Dad seemed happier than he had been in a long time. I settled back into my routine, starting school again after the summer break. It was during a routine checkup at school, about 2 weeks after I'd returned from camp, that everything changed. The school nurse frowned as she examined me. "Rebecca, have you been feeling all right lately?" she asked, concern etched on her face. "You're showing symptoms of rubella. We'll need to do some tests to confirm." I didn't think much of it at the time. I felt fine, and I had no idea what rubella even was. But when the test results came back positive, suddenly everyone around me started panicking. Dad rushed me to the doctor, his face pale with worry. It was there that I learned the severity of the situation. Rubella, while usually mild in children, could be devastating for pregnant women and their unborn babies. My heart sank as I remembered Sarah's pregnancy. The doctor immediately ordered tests for her as well. The next few days were a blur of medical appointments and tense silences at home. Then came the devastating news. Sarah had contracted rubella from me. The doctors explained the high risk of birth defects and strongly recommended terminating the pregnancy. I watched helplessly as Sarah crumbled under the weight of this information. Sarah underwent the procedure to terminate the pregnancy. When she came home from the hospital, she was a shell of her former self. She barely spoke, spending most of her time in bed. I tried to apologize, to explain that I never meant for this to happen, but she wouldn't even look at me. One day, I overheard the doctor talking to Dad in hushed tones. "I'm sorry, but it seems the complications from the procedure have affected her ability to conceive. It's unlikely she'll be able to get pregnant again." Weeks turned into months, and Sarah's grief turned into something darker. She started lashing out, mostly at me. At first, it was just cold glares and cutting remarks. "If it weren't for you, I'd be holding my baby right now," she'd mutter under her breath. I tried to make myself scarce, to give her space to heal. But it didn't seem to help. The tension in the house was unbearable. The months following Sarah's devastating loss brought a chill to our home that no amount of heating could dispel. As I approached my 15th birthday, it became painfully clear that Sarah had made a decision. If she couldn't have children of her own, she would live solely for herself. And in this new life she envisioned, there was no room for me. The change was gradual at first, almost imperceptible. But soon, it became impossible to ignore. Whenever it was time for me to stay with Mom, Dad, and Sarah would suddenly announce grand travel plans. They'd jet off to exotic locations, filling their social media with pictures of beaches, museums, and fancy restaurants. These were the very same trips Dad used to take with me. Now, I was left behind, scrolling through their photos with a mixture of envy and hurt. When it was Dad's turn to have me, life became a twisted game of don't be seen, don't be heard. Sarah insisted that I spend most of my time in my room, taking care of myself. The house rules might as well have been carved in stone. No noise. No loud talking. No active games. No loud laughter. It was as if Sarah was allergic to joy, at least any joy that came from me. Every movement I made seemed to grate on her nerves. She demanded absolute obedience, treating me more like an unwelcome houseguest than family. Unable to bear it any longer, I finally broke down and told Mom everything during my next stay with her. I spilled out all the pain, the isolation, the constant walking on eggshells. Mom's reaction was explosive. She stormed over to Dad's house, her face flushed with anger. "How dare you let that woman treat our daughter this way?" she shouted at Dad. "If this doesn't stop, I'll take you to court. You'll lose all custody rights." The next day, Dad sat me down for a serious talk. My heart leapt. Finally, he was going to stand up for me, to set things right. But as he spoke, my hope turned to ash. "Becky," he began, his voice stern, "Sarah is trying her best. She only wants what's good for you. If you keep complaining like this, making up stories, it might reach a point where I won't be able to see you anymore. Is that what you want?" I felt like I'd been slapped. Not only was Dad not defending me, he was somehow twisting this to make it my fault. Tears stung my eyes as I shook my head. "No, Dad. I don't want that." "Good," he nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Then let's not have any more of these complaints, okay?" From that day forward, I stopped voicing my grievances. I decided to become the perfect, quiet, obedient stepdaughter Sarah wanted, anything to keep my relationship with Dad. But even my best efforts weren't enough. Sarah never missed an opportunity to remind me of the crime I had committed. "If it weren't for you," she'd mutter, eyeing me with disdain, "I'd have a child of my own now." Each accusation was a dagger to my heart. I wanted to scream, to defend myself, to remind them that I was just a kid who didn't even know she was sick. But I swallowed my words, buried my pain deep inside. As I entered my late teens, my needs naturally grew. I needed a new smartphone to keep up with schoolwork and friends, and a laptop for my increasingly demanding assignments. Dad, to his credit, recognized these needs and bought them for me without hesitation. But Sarah, predictably, wasn't pleased. "John, you're spoiling her," I overheard her saying one day. "All this money you're wasting on her, it's ridiculous." "They're not luxuries, Sarah," Dad argued weakly. "She needs these things for school." But Sarah wasn't having it. "Well, if she needs so many expensive things, maybe I should take over managing her expenses. I'll show you how to save money." And just like that, my wardrobe became Sarah's new project. Gone were the days of picking out my own clothes or getting anything new. Sarah scoured second-hand websites and sales, bringing home used clothes and shoes that often didn't fit right or match my style. "Children grow so fast," she'd say with a saccharine smile. "It's not worth spending much on things you'll outgrow in no time." The irony wasn't lost on me. While I wore hand-me-downs and clearance items, Sarah's closet was a parade of designer labels. She'd spend hours carefully curating her outfits, always dressed in the latest fashions, her arms laden with branded bags. As high school graduation approached, a glimmer of hope appeared. Dad promised to buy me a car, a symbol of freedom and independence that I desperately craved. For weeks, I daydreamed about the possibilities, researching models and imagining myself driving off to college. But, as with everything in Dad's house, Sarah had other plans. "A car," she screeched when Dad mentioned it. "John, that's absurd. Do you know how expensive cars are to maintain? Besides, I need a new car. Mine is almost 3 years old." I listened from the top of the stairs, my heart sinking with each word. I knew what was coming next. "And don't forget," Sarah continued, her voice sickly sweet, "Rebecca will be off to college soon. That's going to be a huge expense. We can't afford to buy her a car too." The next day, Dad sat me down, his expression a mix of guilt and resignation. "Becky, about the car," he began. I cut him off, forcing a smile. "It's okay, Dad. I understand. College is expensive, and I appreciate that you're willing to pay for it." Relief washed over his face. "That's right. Any college you want, and we'll cover accommodation too. That's better than a car, right?" I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Once again, Sarah had won, and once again, I was left to swallow my disappointment. As my high school graduation approached, I threw myself into researching colleges. I wanted to find the perfect balance, a school with a strong program in my field of interest, not too far from home, but far enough to give me some independence. After weeks of careful consideration, I finally found it, a well-respected university about 2 hours away. Excited, I showed Dad the brochure, pointing out the excellent facilities and curriculum. "What do you think, Dad? It seems perfect." Before Dad could respond, Sarah snatched the brochure from my hands, her eyes widening as she saw the tuition fees. "Are you out of your mind?" she shrieked, waving the brochure in Dad's face. "This is highway robbery. We can't afford this." "But Sarah," Dad started, "we promised Becky we'd pay for her college." Sarah wasn't listening. She stormed off, returning moments later with her laptop. "Look," she said, shoving the screen at Dad. "This college is much more reasonable. And it's further away, it'll teach her some real independence." I felt my dreams crumbling as I watched Dad's resolve weaken. "Maybe Sarah has a point, Becky," he said, not meeting my eyes. "This other school looks good too, and it would be easier on our finances." Once again, I swallowed my disappointment and nodded, knowing that arguing would be futile. In the end, I enrolled in Sarah's chosen college, miles away from everything and everyone I knew. The years at college passed in a blur of classes, new friendships, and self-discovery. During holidays, I'd return home, always to Mom's house, where I was welcomed with open arms and the comfort of unconditional love. It was during one such break, as I was settling back into my old room at Mom's, that my phone rang. It was Dad. "Becky," he said, his voice a mix of hurt and accusation, "I heard you were back in town. Why haven't you come to see us? We've moved to a new house, bigger, in a better neighborhood. We're having a housewarming party tomorrow night. I want you to come." The next evening, I stood nervously on the porch of a large, impressive house, clutching a carefully chosen housewarming gift. I rang the doorbell, plastering on a smile. The door swung open, and there stood Sarah. Her eyes narrowed as she saw me, her lips curling into a sneer. "What are you doing here?" she hissed. "You weren't invited." Before I could respond, she snatched the gift from my hands and tossed it unceremoniously into a nearby trash can. "We don't need your cheap presents," she spat. And with that, she slammed the door in my face. I stood there, stunned, my ears ringing with the echo of the slamming door. I never saw Dad. He never saw me. The sounds of laughter and clinking glasses drifted through the windows, a party in full swing that I wasn't welcome to join. Humiliated and hurt beyond words, I turned and walked away, tears blurring my vision. I made my way back to Mom's house, my mind a whirlwind of confusion and pain. "How was the party, sweetie?" Mom asked as I walked in. "I didn't go," I lied, forcing a weak smile. "Got a bad headache. Think I'll just go lie down." That evening, as I lay in my childhood bed at Mom's house, my phone buzzed. It was Dad. My stomach clenched as I answered. "Becky, why didn't you come to the housewarming party?" His voice was a mixture of hurt and anger. "We waited for you." I took a deep breath, deciding that it was finally time for the truth. "Dad, I did come." Sarah answered the door. She said I wasn't invited, threw away my gift, and slammed the door in my face. There was a long pause, and for a moment, I dared to hope he'd believe me. But then, "How dare you try to denigrate Sarah like this?" Dad's voice trembled with fury. "She would never do such a thing. I can't believe you'd make up such horrible lies about your stepmother." His words cut deep, reopening old wounds. "Dad, I'm not lying." "Why would I?" "Enough," he interrupted. "I don't want to hear any more of your excuses. When you're ready to apologize to Sarah, you can come see us." The line went dead. I stared at my phone, tears streaming down my face. It was clear now, Dad would always choose Sarah over me. The years that followed were a delicate dance of avoidance and brief, tense encounters. I graduated college, found a job, and built a life for myself. On the rare occasions I saw Dad, it was always on neutral ground, a cafe, a park, never at his house. Then, like a ray of sunshine breaking through storm clouds, I met Michael. He was a few years older, kind, and understanding. We worked for the same company, and what started as coffee breaks turned into dates, then a relationship. After 2 years together, he proposed, and I joyfully accepted. As we planned our wedding, I agonized over the guest list. In the end, I sent an invitation to Dad, and only Dad. I couldn't bring myself to invite Sarah, not after everything. The phone call came 3 days later. Dad was livid. "Rebecca," he barked, using my full name, "how could you do this? How could you exclude Sarah from your wedding? After all she's done for you, all the love and care she's given you over the years? This is a slap in the face." Something in me snapped. Years of pent-up frustration and hurt came pouring out. I reminded him of everything, the second-hand clothes, the rejection of the car, the choice of a cheap college, and the gift thrown in the trash. There was silence on the other end of the line. When Dad finally spoke, his voice was small, almost unrecognizable. "I'm so sorry," Dad whispered. "I've been a terrible father. I put Sarah first, and I shouldn't have. Can you ever forgive me?" His words, so long awaited, washed over me. I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. "It's not going to be easy, Dad," I said honestly. "We have a lot to work through." "I know," he replied. "But I want to try. Please, let me walk you down the aisle. I'll come alone, I promise. Just give me a chance to make things right." As I ended the call, I felt a mix of emotions, hope, trepidation, a cautious optimism. Could this be the turning point I'd longed for? Could Dad and I rebuild our relationship? The day before my wedding dawned bright and clear. As I busied myself with last-minute preparations, my phone rang. It was Dad. My heart lifted for a moment, thinking he was calling with well wishes. How wrong I was. "Becky," his voice was strained, "I won't be able to come to the wedding tomorrow. It's Sarah, she's in the hospital." Her blood pressure skyrocketed. She's been so stressed about this wedding situation. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Dad, This is your fault, you know," he cut me off. "If you had just invited her, if you hadn't been so selfish." "Selfish?" I interrupted, my voice rising. Are you kidding me? I can't leave her alone in the hospital, Dad continued as if I hadn't spoken. I won't be at your celebration. I hope you're happy now. The line went dead before I could respond. I stood there, phone in hand, a mixture of anger and disbelief washing over me. After everything, the apology, the promises to do better, here we were again. Sarah first, always Sarah. Deep down, I knew what this was. Sarah had most likely faked or exaggerated her condition to keep Dad from attending my wedding. It was her final power play, her way of ensuring she remained the center of Dad's world. But I couldn't prove it. More importantly, I didn't want to. I was done playing her games, done trying to win Dad's approval. This was my wedding day, and I refused to let them ruin it. Still, as the initial anger faded, a wave of sadness washed over me. Who would walk me down the aisle now? As if sensing my distress, Mom appeared at my door. Honey, what's wrong? Through tears, I explained the situation. Mom listened, her face a mix of sympathy and barely contained fury. Oh, sweetie, she said, pulling me into a hug. I'm so sorry, but you know what? What about your grandfather? He loves you so much, and I know he'd be honored to walk you down the aisle. The next day, as the wedding march began to play, I stood arm in arm with my grandfather. He beamed with pride, his eyes misty. As we walked down the aisle, I saw Michael waiting for me, his face radiant with love. I saw Mom, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. I saw friends and family, all there to celebrate with us. And you know what? I didn't miss Dad's presence at all. The people who truly loved me, who had always been there for me, they were all here. The days following the wedding were a blissful whirlwind. As we settled into our new routine, I decided to share our joy with friends and family by posting some wedding photos on social media. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with comments full of congratulations and well wishes flooding in. But then, like a dark cloud on a sunny day, Sarah's name appeared in the notifications. With trepidation, I clicked on her comment, and felt my stomach churn as I read her words. How touching to see Rebecca being walked down the aisle by her grandfather. It's a shame her own father and his loving wife weren't even invited to this joyous occasion. I suppose we should be grateful for small mercies, at least this time she didn't infect anyone with rubella and ruin more lives. Remember, Rebecca, actions have consequences. I stared at the screen, a mixture of anger and disbelief washing over me. Even now, on what should have been the happiest day of my life, Sarah couldn't resist trying to hurt me. She was still clinging to that old guilt, wielding it like a weapon. Without hesitation, I blocked Sarah's account. Then, after a moment's consideration, I blocked Dad's too. It was time to cut them out of my life completely. As I set down my phone, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For years, I had carried the burden of guilt over the rubella incident. I had let Sarah's cruel words seep into my psyche, convincing me that I was somehow responsible for her inability to have children. But I was just a child myself then. I didn't know I was sick. I couldn't have known the consequences. It was a tragic accident, nothing more. You know, I said to Michael, my voice stronger than I expected, I'm done feeling guilty about the rubella. It wasn't my fault. None of it was my fault. Michael pulled me into a hug. Of course it wasn't. You were a kid, Becca. You didn't do anything wrong. As I melted into his embrace, I felt years of pent-up emotion begin to release. Tears flowed freely, but they weren't tears of sadness or guilt. They were tears of relief, of liberation. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into building my new life with Michael. We decorated our home, planned for the future, and surrounded ourselves with people who truly loved and supported us. Mom and my grandparents were frequent visitors, filling our home with laughter and warmth. My friends, who had stood by me through all the ups and downs, became an even more integral part of our lives. The road that led me here hadn't been easy. There had been pain, betrayal, and heartache along the way. But it had also led me to this moment, to this life filled with love and genuine happiness. I thought about the little girl I once was, constantly seeking approval and love from those who couldn't or wouldn't give it. I wished I could go back and tell her that it would all be okay, that she would find her way to happiness. But then I realized that little girl was still a part of me. And by choosing happiness now, by surrounding myself with love and cutting out toxicity, I was healing her too.